This is Gateway City Sports.
It's a trap!
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
This is the Team of Rivals podcast.
Everything you want to hear from the big sports to the big screen.
He's all by himself, fires into the end zone. Caught! Touchdown! No!
Vaughn into the windup in his first offering. Just a bit outside. He tried the corner and missed.
Doesn't like you. I don't like you either.
Time winding down, Michael for three. Yeah! Yes! She is gone!
I don't believe what I just saw.
Go crazy, folks! Go crazy!
You believe in miracles? Yes!
You may fire when ready.
What?
Welcome, Cubs and Cardinals fans. I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to say next because Slack sucks. They've decided that you need to pay a monthly fee, and so they want like $25 a month out of Ron and Elliot and I just so that we can be able to access content that we created. So fuck Slack. We just got our episode title and we're only 1 minute in. This is the Team of Rivals podcast, proud members of the Gateway City Sports Network. We're coming to you, well, I mean, it's live when we're recording it, but it won't be live by the time you're listening to it. It's a season wrap-up and a postseason preview. Joining me tonight, because he's always joining me, my co-host, co-founder, Ron. We are wrapping up season 6.
Season 6 is almost done, right? I mean, we'll see how far it goes, but you failed to mention a name tonight, and I'm not surprised. We didn't talk about it before, but he's been with us for like a month.
I know. I kind of feel like he's blowing us off. He's ghosting us like our former redheaded co-host.
I was looking at the messages back and forth, and he was all about it. Good question for the show Thursday, and where the hell is he at?
I think he's doing that to encourage us because he wants to listen to it. He wants to hear some quality content that is completely unscripted because once again, Slack sucks.
Slack does suck. You know, to give you guys some context, if you'd never used it before, it's almost like a web-based, I guess Dropbox is as well, but it's a web-based thing where we would share show notes. When I mean show notes, I don't mean content we're covering. We usually wing that. We do a pretty good job. All the other stuff, the intros, the outro, the ad reads. We're going to try our best from Total Recall tonight, and we'll see how well these near 50-year-old brains can remember. I might not even try the ad reads.
Yeah, it's not going to be pretty.
Sean Wiley at allstate.com and 5th Street Motors. Check them out. Pacific, Missouri. Difficult? 5th Street Motors.
You know what you need? You need insurance. What kind of insurance? Slack insurance.
You need a Slack subscription. You know, remember a day, Pete, when you would buy the disc? And here, I know what we're going to sound like here, but what the young folks these days, Gen Zers, didn't know about this, and I don't blame them. A lot of millennials don't either. You know, you could buy Microsoft Office, student rate, what was it, a couple $100, Pete?
Yeah.
You know, and if you were not a student and you just wanted it for whatever you were doing, probably maybe $400 or $500, you'd buy the disc. You'd have Microsoft Office, whatever year it was. It'd be yours permanently.
Yep.
They might update it every once in a while, but as the years went by, you know, they would put a new version out, a lot better features, and sometimes there was an issue with backwards and forward compatibility, but when you bought that software, it was yours permanently. Same thing with Adobe. Same thing with everything else. Nowadays, you just can't buy shit anymore. They want your money every month. So Adobe was the same way. You know, all those Adobe programs, Photoshop, Illustrator, some of the things I've edited our videos on. You want that entire suite. It's like $60 a month, man. It's ridiculous. And you used to be able to buy it one time and have enough. And if you ever felt the need 4 or 5 years later to upgrade, you throw down the money and you do it happily. They get more out of us today. It's annoying. Slack has no business. $8 a head per month. Yep. And let's face it, Elliott never used it anyway, so we wouldn't be paying for him anyway. But still, it is annoying, and I know other people out there are annoyed with it as well. Subscriptions, man, it's just what everybody wants to do these days. Well,
and here's the problem that I have in particular in this use case. If you decide that, you know what, I'm just not going to, I have no more value out of the Adobe suite. Well, all those videos, all those files you created, you still own those.
Yeah.
Right? They're still yours. You're not going to be able to manipulate them anymore in Adobe, but still the products, the files that you created, they're still yours. Now with Slack, all of the stuff that we've written over the years that we posted in
all
there,
gone.
We can't even access it to download it.
Audio clips.
It's hidden from us.
Yeah.
We have to pay to get the stuff that we've created.
Yeah. And I don't recall, and I don't check the Team of Rivals podcast email all that often, but I don't recall getting an email that they were shutting this off either unless we started paying for it. They put our own content behind a paywall from us, which is funny.
There was an email about 90 days ago, and it said that you could do a free thing. And as long as it was within 90 days, you'd still be able to access it. Well, I didn't go through and update everything with like a period so that it would be newer than 90 days. Right. So, I mean, if we were to actually go in there,
the deadline was yesterday, by the way.
Yeah. I think our social media tags, I think you can still access that workspace. So we'll still be able to see all of the social media tags. I probably should download those before they go away tomorrow.
Yeah. You probably have 3 more days of that, and they're going to up it to $15 a head per month just to get all your shit back. Whatever. Nobody's listening to us. Nobody wants to download this to listen to us bitch about subscription services. So, all
right. So you know what you mentioned. You know,
it'd be funny if we just turned it on them right now and said this is going to start being a subscription podcast. We're just going to,
I mean,
if we'd like 12 downloads a month, sure.
Hey, you know what? We could use $60.
We do for lots of things.
Yeah, we could. So let's get right into it. I mean, since you mentioned him already, the permanent, occasional, extraordinarily temporary guest host, Elliott, thought that it would be a good conversation for us to have this week. So let's have that conversation, and he cannot weigh in on it.
And the best part is without him.
That's right. What's more valuable, home run number 700 or home run number 62?
I'm just going to say 700 home runs seems more valuable to me, and I'll get into some of the reasons why. I won't try to be too long-winded here. There was a time, I think, when we were all collecting baseball cards in the 80s where that 61 was a hallowed record in baseball, and a lot of us couldn't envision anybody touching it, right? I think Cecil Fielder gave us our biggest thrill during that era, and I think he got to 50. I think Andre Dawson got to 49. I think Mark McGwire in his rookie year got to 49. And, it gets your attention, but nobody got any closer than that. I think Fielder hit 51 or something in one of those years. And then you get to the late 90s, early 2000s. Of course, we have the era, right, where, people like Luis Gonzalez all of a sudden cranked out 56 home runs one year. Brady Anderson, 57. Brett Boone hit like a well above average there for a couple years in home runs. And it was just, it was a bunch of guys, right, that you... Hindsight's awesome, right? Like we can look back and go, well, we were younger then, man. Even if we thought maybe something was happening there, like we didn't want to believe it. Baseball was fun. And so 62, it was shattered. It's like, what's he have? Like the 6th highest home run total or 7th or something like that now?
But he does have the AL record.
He does have the AL record. Look, I'm not saying his accomplishment isn't extraordinary. It really is. I mean, that's a hell of a season that you have to put up. You have to put up some big weeks, some big months, and you have to continue to do it, and then you got pressure at the very end to get over the hump. So he's got the AL record, but to me, like the thrill wasn't there. I don't know if it's because I'm older. I don't know if it's because I see the home run these days as like I do a slam dunk in basketball. Like everybody can do it. Some people just do it more frequently. Some people only try to do it. So the home run thing to me isn't really just not a big deal anymore. I'm more wowed by, I think, the accomplishments, the longevity. Wainwright Molina having record number of starts as a battery in baseball. They have that record now. That's pretty impressive. And the reason it's impressive is like, yeah, I know they wear Cardinals uniforms, right? So there's some bias there, right? They're my guys. But I do look at that and I go, man, we're never going to see that again. Just imagine how long you have to stay with one club, which is more uncommon these days, you have to stay relatively healthy for that long. And just a lot of things have to go right in order to get those totals. And I look at Albert's 700 home runs over 21 seasons, 22 seasons. I didn't think he was going to get there this year, especially halfway through the year. He only had 6 home runs, and he wasn't, getting a ton of at bats. So, I think it's going to be a very long time before we see somebody get close to that mark again. And so I think those will last longer. Those are over a career, and you've got to watch, no matter who that player is, you've got to watch them for their whole career and then watch them get to that mark. So I think the 700 mark is a lot. It's a slow burn, man. It took a lot of years to get there. So that one to me is more impressive for those reasons, no matter who the player is, really.
Yeah, I tell you what, I'm 100% with you. And I think along those same lines, what you were saying, I really think that what cheapened the single season home run record was Sammy Sosa. It wasn't that he and McGwire had this epic chase, right? Because we did have, as you said, we had spikes throughout the years where Cecil Fielder and Mark McGwire and guys gave us a thrill. And even it being cheapened by guys like Brady Anderson suddenly popping out of nowhere and putting up ridiculous numbers, it was still somewhat plausible, right? And then you had this epic battle between McGwire and Sosa where you're like, oh my God, these two guys caught fire. They were feeding each other. Like, awesome. And then Sosa comes back and he does it again the next year. 3
years in a row, right? He went over 60.
Yeah. You put up those kind of numbers, all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay. This is like the slam dunk. Anybody can do it at any time. And a little bit to that point, somebody ran the numbers and said that if Aaron Judge had been hitting the baseball that they were using 3 years ago, he probably would have had 80 home runs this year. Just because the ball that they're using now has so suppressed those kind of numbers, which makes his season this year, his offensive season, all the more remarkable.
Yeah.
But still, what happened in the 90s and in the early 2000s, it cheapened it. Whereas I 100% agree with you. There are 4 guys in baseball history who have hit 700 or more home runs. And despite all of the prolific home run hitters that there have been throughout the years, only 4 have managed to have a career and a consistency long enough to put up those kind of numbers. I mean, you think about it. If you play 20 seasons, you have to average 35 home runs a year.
Right.
Average 35. That's insane. And stay healthy enough to do it for 20 seasons. And Albert's a perfect example of it. Played 22 seasons and he had to put up some insane years in order to make up for the last couple of years where he just was not the same hitter.
Right. Yeah.
So for him to be able to do that, yeah, I'm 100% with you. Who knows what the auction market will do, because I'm sure that the fact that it's a Yankee instead of a Cardinal is going to skew the value of that 60-second home run ball. But still, I think all other things being equal, I think that 700th home run ball is far more valuable than number 62.
I'm sitting right on top of it, right? Because it's one of my players. But it felt, at least just from hearing it through social channels, the major sports news media outlets, obviously a lot of talk about Judge and him approaching the record and then ultimately breaking it for the American League. I still felt that the Pujols walk to 700 at the very end was a little louder.
Yeah. Throughout
baseball. That doesn't mean that the rest of the sports world values 700 over 62. That's just kind of how it landed on me. But for me personally, I've already given my opinion. I think that is they're both impressive, but I think 700, it takes a lot to get that to happen. A lot.
I wonder if part of the reason why that march to 700 seemed to catch people's imagination and had more media buzz around it also was because there was an urgency to it. Right. There was that sense that if he doesn't do it, he's not gonna do it. Whereas Aaron Judge is, he's not young.
He'll get a few more cracks at it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. If he didn't get to 62 this year, it's feasible that he could do it. And depending on whether or not he re-signs with the Yankees, if he goes to the right club, like if he was to go to Houston, he'd easily surpass 62 with that short porch in left field.
And that would never happen. We would imagine like somewhere like Cincinnati too, where
right.
A lot of places.
If he goes to the right venue.
Yeah. You're right. I think it's a good point. Well, there's 3 things, right? all the reasons we stated before. The fact that he's retiring at the end of the year. So you're right. He was up against the clock, right? And then I think a third big one too is because he returned to his original team. I think that played a part in it as well. So anyway, it's very, very cool to see a couple nice send-offs to Molina and Albert, him reaching that 7 home run plateau, being one of only 4 players. And as much as we have always thought about Albert as maybe being a home run hitter, he was so much more than that, especially when he was in his prime. Situational hitter, high averages, lots of RBIs. He passed Babe Ruth in career
Didn't
RBIs.
strike out a ridiculous amount.
No,
Yeah.
it is amazing. I think he struck. Well, it was within. I think I can count him on one hand, but he struck out fewer times than he got a hit. So I mean, I don't know if that may have been just this year, but there's lots of things that go into Albert. He was a smart ball player. When he's in his prime and his legs were healthy, he was an excellent defender at first base. I remember a play against the Phillies, who they'll be playing tomorrow night, in 2011, where he came off of first base, basically walking away from a sure out to cut the throw off to nail a guy going from second to third. Those are a lot of instincts. You just don't see it very often in baseball, where guys are thinking ahead so quickly that they'll catch things like that. Like, screw this out at first. I've got a shot at this guy taking third base, and I'm going to cut the throw. I'm going to get off the bag, cut the throw down a little bit, and get him. It's just little things like that I've always thought when I think of Albert. The home runs just go right along with it, but I think to a lot of us that watched him throughout his career, he was a lot more than just a slugger.
Yep. Actually, what I'd really love to hear is, because he kind of started this whole thing, I'd love to hear Elliot's take on which one is a more valuable baseball.
It's profound.
Elliot, I didn't even consider that. That was amazing. This is the kind of quality content that we count on you for, buddy.
If you guys subscribe to our subscription service, you can hear Elliot's take.
Yeah, we hid that behind the paywall.
We've just put Elliot behind a paywall. So if you hear strange silences here, you have to pay the access fee to hear our third co-host, basically.
That's right. We just have a cricket overlay. So, you'll have to join our Patreon.
That's
Become
right.
a subscriber.
We have a Patreon?
It's super like. Nobody would pay for it. Why would we go to that effort when nobody's going to send us money?
I wouldn't.
Actually, there you go. Put it in the chat. Would you pay content? Would you pay actual money for this content?
Our chat, just me and you. No.
That's right.
Hell no.
What do you mean we already do pay money for this?
We already paid for it for years. How many subscriptions fees do I not bitch about? We've had to pay for 6+ years now. I know. Whatever.
I know. Hey, bad week to be a former Cardinals manager.
Really is. Yeah, I know.
DLR calls it quits, and then what was it? Was it earlier today or was it yesterday? Mike Matheny got the boot.
Yep. They're not going to bring him back. Look, I don't know how. I guess there's only 30 managerial jobs. You get a chance to get one of them. They're all probably pretty exciting when you don't have one, right? So you want to jump on it. Is this something about the direction Kansas City's heading? However he dealt with younger startup players, just there's something wrong, it felt, in St. Louis. If you look at the situation with Colton Wong, a lot of the younger guys, I just don't. Mike Matheny did really well when he inherited a team that had an established core and kind of a way of doing things and a system, some veterans on the club. I think he did pretty well. When it turned over and younger players started coming up, it seems things just kind of fell apart for him, lost control. I don't know.
He wasn't able to provide that leadership that they needed. He relied on the veterans previously to provide that.
Somebody made a point too, and out there on Twitter, that his wheelhouse is probably in player development, teaching, and somewhere in a system, being that kind of instructor, or I'm not saying head of scouting or anything, but instruction in the minor league. Some of those roles are pretty big, right? And just as important as who's scratching in the lineup and making bullpen moves every night. Who's developing players in your system is super important. So a role with him in baseball is probably a better fit. And I can't remember where I read that tonight, but I think it's a really good point. So he'll find something.
Interesting,
he'll find something in baseball, but I think being in the dugout, just it hasn't worked for him in two places now. So
it's interesting you bring that up, because there was an article in The Athletic today about, and it was a pretty deep dive into, are the Cubs turning the corner? and the overhaul that they have undertaken in the whole organization. And it kind of ties into what you're talking about with Mike Matheny there, that one of the big things that the Cubs have done, and this probably isn't unique to the more successful organizations, but it is for the Cubs, apparently, is that they've started to really integrate their development models and everything between the minors and the majors. That previously there was the minor league development system and there was the major league system, and never the twain shall meet. And they're starting to bring them both together so that players are hearing the same messages all the way from low A all the way up until they get to the majors.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's the kind of role that Mike Matheny would thrive in, not necessarily the guy at the top of that setting up exactly what the development is, but the guy who's in there making sure that it actually happens, and who's the one who's getting his hands dirty with the players from the bottom to the top, so that when he meets them at AAA, he can be brought in when they break into the majors, and he can be like, all right, you remember when we were, down in Kannapolis 4 years ago and we were talking about this, this is the adjustment. This is what I'm seeing that you're missing, and you need to go back to that,
Yeah. Here's some of that about the Cardinals hitting coach too, Jeff Albert, where a lot of frustration with him over the last few years, right? Since they installed him, with the inconsistency in the offense and, the young players coming up, just not, but the wave of Jeff Albert pupils hasn't arrived at the major leagues yet. I guess in a way they've instilled his system all the way down to lower levels of the minor leagues, but yet he's the hitting coach here at the major league level. So it's kind of, I don't know, it'll be interesting to see that once a crop of those really graduates that have kind of been under his program, what will happen. So it's just kind of strange to not see him more involved at those levels rather than all the way at the top. So I don't know how much influence he's had on most that are on the Cardinals roster right now. The active major league roster is probably a handful there that have been in the system for a few years that maybe have been taught in that way, or at least started to begin to be taught that way. But I don't really think we've seen his impact on the organization as we probably have another year or two before we start seeing most of these guys. So it'll be interesting to see if that criticism fades away, fizzles away, or if it stays, if it sticks. Because I mean, think about these veteran major league hitters. I'm just not sure how much influence a hitting coach has over most of these guys, and they've already been in the league. What are they going to tell them? Get your elbow up, buddy. Keep your eye on the ball. I mean, what the hell are they telling them at bat that's going to make a difference? I don't know.
Yeah, I'd love to hear the modern day conversations with the hitting coach or with the pitching coach, right? Because we know that it's going deeper. It's going deeper than that now, because they know so much more about the way that a specific player, how their body moves, what the best things for them to do are. And there are some players who, keep your elbow up is absolutely the worst thing that you can tell them, right? Because that's just not their body mechanics.
Yeah, that's the famous dad sitting in the bleachers at practice line, right? Like telling your son, get your elbow up. Like it's always the thing that you spit out when you really don't know what to say. I'm always like looking back at him going, just thank you for being here to support your youth. Let me work on his hands. His elbow would take care of itself. And you just sit down. Thank you though.
Well, so that's one former Cardinals manager. Boy.
You got another one?
Well, yeah. I mean, Jerry Reinsdorf, he really needs to step away from the controls for both of his teams and just really let him take it over, because, I mean,
hey, that sounds like another Chicago team that needs to have the owner step away. Right?
Yeah. I mean, 2 wasted seasons. And now there's a ton of urgency on whoever it is that the White Sox hire for next year, because this window is closing fast for the White Sox. It's becoming increasingly clear. Obviously being in Chicago and being in a Southwest suburb, I work with a lot of White Sox fans. And so I hear from them all the things that they're seeing watching their team. And they're not sold on Eloy Jimenez. They appreciate his power, but he's always injured. He can't play defense. He doesn't really have a position. So they're not sold on him. They want to get rid of Yohan Moncada. I mean, there's not a whole lot of time left on this team. And Tony La Russa, man, two just completely wasted seasons. Not a good look.
He really should have just rode off in the sunset after that World Series victory, and then the All-Star game he managed next year didn't mean anything. But
yeah, when Jerry Reinsdorf called him, he really should have said, "Jerry, I appreciate it.
I went out on top."
The gesture.
Yeah.
I'll be more than happy to consult, answer any questions you want. I'll come back as a bench coach, but I don't need to be the guy on top anymore.
Yeah, he had a rough year, and for health reasons, I think he's done, right? So
yep, he's announced he's officially retiring, right?
Yeah,
I mean, we knew that he wasn't coming back next year, but he made it official this week.
Yeah,
and perfect timing. I don't know if you saw this, but apparently Joe Madden's writing a book with blanking on his name right now, but one of the writers from, I think it's Verducci from Sports Illustrated. And the excerpt that they dropped on the internet today was about how he got fired and why he got fired. And of course, in good old fashioned Joe Madden fashion, everybody's fault but his. Damn front office and owners meddling in his job, telling him how to do his job. Like, how dare they? How dare they tell him how to do his job? Because they hired him and they signed the paychecks. But I mean, that's what Joe wants. You hire me, now get the fuck out of my clubhouse.
Everybody has to answer to somebody, right?
That's right. No, not Joe Madden.
Not Joe Madden. Well, I think that after capturing a title there in Chicago, after that longest drought in sports, he probably thought he was untouchable for a while and would just kind of be left to run the team however he seemed fit. Not the case. Nope. Not the case. Not when you set expectations high all of a sudden. And you don't continue to deliver those results. I think another World Series appearance might have saved him, at least, even if he didn't capture it. But that, I don't know. You were closer to it than I was. You probably know a lot more about, what happened there towards the end in Chicago. Did he lose control of the players? Just uncooperative? Did he make moves that, pissed the Owen group off? I mean, who knows?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of all of it.
Read the
right.
book.
I mean, we know he's alluded to it a little bit. There was definitely a difference in philosophy at the end there between Joe and.
That's why Mike Schultz got fired.
But also, I think you're right. I think that players stopped listening to him. They no longer they were no longer buying his act, and he was. He's like the tired. I would imagine for them, he's like the tired old wrestler, right? We've seen this before. We know all of your moves. We know what's coming next. It doesn't capture the imagination. It doesn't inspire like it used to. We don't need to listen to you anymore, old man. Give us something new.
He's been the longest tenured Cubs manager in the last 2 decades. Who's it been?
Damn, I don't know. Maybe the most overrated manager in baseball.
Old Joe?
No, Dusty Baker.
He was 03 to 05?
I'll look it up.
Maybe him and Joe share the longevity title.
I mean, seriously though, is there anybody who is more overrated than Dusty Baker?
Oh no, I wasn't even thinking about him. I don't know. Looking at the resume, I guess you can understand why, right? I mean, he had a World Series appearance with the Giants. He was 1 year away from capturing that title with the Nationals, right? But they were done with him. Went pretty far with Houston last year. So, I mean, like you look at his resume, you're like, okay, you could see why people would overrate him.
Yeah, but he's never been able to close the deal.
He hasn't, but there's a lot of people that have never even been to the table.
Okay, that's great. But is he getting to the table because he's such a phenomenal manager or because he's been given loaded rosters?
I think a manager's only
he
as
got
good
to the
as,
World Series last year. He didn't do jack shit to get that team to the World Series. That team got the World Series because of the talent they had.
Yeah, and I can't argue with that a whole hell of a lot, right? I mean, he's probably on his way again this year. So
right, and he hasn't done anything right there. Nothing that Dusty Baker did in the last 10 years prepared the Houston Astros to go to the World Series last year, right? He just walked in. It's like somebody gave him the keys to a McLaren and he was like, see, I know how to drive fast.
He
No,
was
you have a
just-
really fast car.
As a rival team, hearing his press conferences were irritating, right? Never want to give the other team full credit. Season records were luck of the draw because of the 6 interleague games. Goddamn Cardinals got to play the Royals. Luck of the draw, I guess. Luck of the draw.
All right, so here's the answer to your question. Longest tenure is Joe Madden.
Okay.
810 games.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And I'm going to extend it a little more than 2 decades. Take a guess. Who's the second longest tenured Cubs manager? Oh, Jesus.
Zimmer?
Let's go back.
Don Zimmer?
Let's go back to 1972. So we go all the way back to Leo the Lip. Okay. Leo DeRocher had 1,065 games for the Cubs. He ended in 72. Since then, the longest tenured manager is Joe Madden. Who's number 2? You're not going to get it.
Jim Fry.
Nope. Not even close.
Oh, shit. Hold on.
Jim Fry only managed 379 games for the Cubs.
Really? It was that? Okay, hold on.
That's it. Just 3 seasons.
Let me think here. Give me was it in the 70s or 80s? 90s?
Yep.
Hang on. Boy, it's hard to remember who the hell these guys were.
I know.
Fuck, I'll never get it.
I mean, shit, Ron, since you and I met and became friends, the Cubs have had 11 managers.
That's funny. It really is. Who's got the second highest tenure there?
I'm sorry, 10 managers, not 9.
Oh.
The second longest tenure since Leo DeRocher in 1972, Jim Riggleman.
Jim Riggleman. Okay. Yep.
From 95 to 99, he managed 794 games for the Cubs.
Okay. Yep, I remember the name.
And
I kind of remember what he looks like too.
Assuming that he sticks around next year all the way to the end, which I can't imagine that he won't, David Ross will become the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. No, he'll pass him. He'll become the 5th longest tenured manager in Cubs history since Leo DeRocher.
Jesus Christ. That's like, you said 10 since we've known each other, what, 21 years?
Yep.
So roughly a manager every 2 years.
Yeah. And you guys have had what, 3?
So we met, yeah. TLR was there.
4.
Right.
It'd be 4.
Right. Mike Schultz's stay was shorter than expected. So was Matheny's. So yeah, 4. And I don't know about Ollie either.
Unbelievable.
They have a short shelf life, man. They're like middle relievers these days.
They are. Well, and that was an interesting thing, and I will give them credit for it. In Madden and Verducci's book, the excerpt that was released today, they did talk about that, how increasingly front offices are hiring guys who have no tenure, right, who have no experience because they want to be more involved in the day-to-day decisions. They feel like the analytics that they're paying good money for and that they're spending a lot of time on, gives a lot of color. And so they want to be able to tell it. And that was one of the things that Madden said that he pushed back on and that ultimately led to his firing was the Angels manager GM coming in and telling him during that 13-game losing streak that ultimately led to him getting fired. They were getting calls from the front office saying, these are the relievers that you can't use today. These are the guys who are down because our analytics show that, you got to give them the day off.
Didn't like it. Yeah, I'm wondering too.
I don't totally disagree with Joe, right? I mean, it's something that you and I have talked about. The game has become so sterile and so robotic that they're no longer treated as players. And that's one of the things that Madden does complain about in the book is that managers aren't trusted anymore for their feel, for their gut instincts about how well they know players and how they answer questions and how they look. That they're just supposed to adhere to a formula and it doesn't matter who you're dealing with.
Yeah, I can understand the frustration there too, especially when, this stuff is kind of new. You've been doing it for decades now or seen it done. And now all of a sudden you gotta get a phone call or a text or an email saying, hey, you got 3 relievers down there you can't use today. And I'm sure it's, I don't know where the lanes are anymore, but I'm sure it was like stay in your own goddamn lane up there. You're wearing a tie.
But at the same time, once again, it's never anybody. It's everybody else's fault. It's never Joe's fault. Yeah. Joe never wears it. Joe
I
never,
don't. Now that you brought up
makes a mistake.
I guess the Cardinals worded it as a fundamental difference, or fundamental difference in philosophy, fundamental difference in approach. Mike Schultz's departure has never been real clear either. What was that? I don't know how much that would have had to do with analytics. I don't know if it's anywhere similar to the same thing Joe Madden ran into. So I don't know.
Probably.
Yep.
Probably. So listen, as we're heading into the postseason, before we have this little postseason preview, how are you feeling about the season in retrospect? Like looking at the Cardinals season, did it live up to expectations, exceed expectations? Just looking at the regular season, how do you feel about this team?
I would say that it slightly exceeded expectations given the huge questions we had around the pitching staff in general. I think bullpen probably reasonably met anybody's expectations who follows the team. We all had deep concerns about the pitching staff, and rightfully so. Second year in a row, they've had to call in or make a couple deals to get 2 arms in. Thankfully, those 2 arms have been great for them, up to this point. I think a little above, right? Because last year they pulled off and squeezed whatever was left out of John Lester and Jay Happ to get him, across the finish line to the end of the year and get him into the postseason. Their pitching implodes again around May, June, and they had to pull off another deal for 2 more arms, second year in a row. Now, how many times is that going to work for you? You wouldn't think it would work 2 years in a row, but it has somehow. And so I think this year it was a little bit of they exceeded. I will say that, we all knew that their schedule was going to be a lot weaker the last, third of the year, last 25% of the game, somewhere around that, somewhere in the neighborhood there. We knew the schedule was soft, so you knew they had a chance to finish strong. But I still think pulling off a deal for 2 arms that have really helped them 2 years in a row is a hard thing to do. And I wouldn't expect them to do it year in and year out. So above.
And you would got to think that it has to be something that they address next year, because they're not going to have the cheat code of having Yadier Molina there when those new pitchers are brought in to ease the transition.
Yeah, you're right. God mode is going to wear off in the trade market eventually.
Yeah, I mean, if he sticks to his word and this is it, really, Andrew Kisner or Ivan Herrera are going to be the guys who are going to welcome in a new veteran pitcher and help him unlock his very best. I mean, clearly, Jose Quintana is pitching the way he is not because he's so comfortable in St. Louis. It's Yachty. It's absolutely Yachty.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's a little bit of adrenaline change too, right, to the system. All of a sudden, you're in a stadium that's more packed, right?
Yep.
Versus being in Pittsburgh where it's dismal.
Although that didn't benefit him when he came to the Cubs, but I digress.
Well, fine. But that was Joe Madden's fault. No, not his fault. Front office.
No, it was not Joe's fault. It was everybody else's fault.
Everybody else's fault. Steve Bartman's fault. I think it had a lot to do with the catcher, calling the game, working with the pitcher. Absolutely. Totally agree. Also a change of scenery in that aspect. And I don't know as a player how they feel, how expectations mount on these guys, one market versus the next. I know Chicago can be tough. I definitely know like New York and Boston are going to be brutal.
Philadelphia,
St. Louis. True, that one too. If you take Twitter out of the equation, ignore that Twitter exists, I don't know that the same pressures may be felt in St. Louis as it is in a bigger market team. So I don't know if that had any play in this or not. But I mean, a lot of these guys are, will accept these trades. We'll look forward to these trades because they get to pitch. They get to pitch to a catcher with that kind of pedigree, that kind of history of making pitchers better. It's definitely an appeal for them, right? That won't be there next year. So, yeah, you're right. I like the way you put it. Yeah, cheat code, can't use it. I think the league is going to figure it out. Front offices are going to figure that one out real quick. So, if they don't address pitching this offseason, we'll be bitching about the same thing come April next year.
That's right.
What about your Cubs?
Honestly, and please, this is for you, and this is for the handful of listeners that we have. I am not saying that the Cubs are going to win the World Series in 2024. Let me be clear. However, this year felt a lot like 2014 in that at the end of the year, we started to see flashes of what that team could become, right? We didn't know that they were going to rise so quickly. I mean, if you were to go back at the end of 2014 and you were to ask Cubs fans what they were seeing on the field and how they were feeling about the future, we would have been pointing towards 2017. Okay, everything's starting to align. 2017 is going to be our year. And we got there a year early. None of us was expecting them to win the World Series in 2016, to come out of the gate like a goddamn house on fire. I remember just trolling you with text messages at the beginning of 2016 because they were like, I don't know, something insane. Like they were 28-3 or something. And I was like, is that good, Ron? You know, because they came out of the gate and they were just playing unbelievably well. I'm not saying that that's what the 2024 team is going to be like, but it does feel like after the trade deadline this year, when they traded away some very useful players, right? It was mostly out of the bullpen, but still they traded away some useful players and this team played better down the stretch. And it was the same thing. Yes, the competition got softer, but they were beating up on teams at the end of the year that they were not beating earlier in the year. And they swept the Phillies. They swept the Mets. Not only did they sweep the Phillies, but for the first time in the history of that matchup, which goes almost 150 years, they swept the season series. Neither team has swept the season series in the entire existence of the Phillies and the Cubs. But for the first time ever, the Cubs swept a playoff team.
Yeah.
They took all 6 games against the Phillies.
I didn't realize they had swept the season. Where they play them 6-7 times somewhere, like
6 times.
Something like that. 6 times. Yeah.
So they won all 6 games against the Phillies. A bad team doesn't do that.
Yeah.
And so while they finished with the 12th worst record in baseball, I'm optimistic about what I saw at the end of the year. And it seems to be that things are starting to come together. Again, I'm not saying that they are, one marquee shortstop and an ace starting pitcher away from winning the World Series, but I don't think it's beyond expectation to start talking about the playoffs for next year. And obviously anything could happen.
Yeah.
But they should be in contention to win enough games to at least qualify for a wild card. I don't know that they're necessarily going to compete for the division next year. I don't know that they're that good. We'll see what happens in the offseason. But this is a team that definitely showed flashes, especially their pitching staff. The Cubs pitching staff has looked really good. And for a team that doesn't have a lot of names, or at least a lot of names now, Marcus Stroman really is the only name in the Cubs whole staff. Everybody else is a bunch of who's this guy. And, Kyle Hendricks is injured. So for them to end up where they did and to come on in the second half like they did, I'm optimistic. Yeah, this year was disappointing, especially the first half of the year. But you're starting to see those indications, just like we did 8 years ago, that this team really may be turning the corner. So, I'm optimistic about the next year. And I am, as a long-suffering Cubs fan, I am all ready to be massively disappointed next year.
Well, you never know. What do you think about, probably Contreras' rep agency throwing more fuel on the fire here of, this rumor about, the Cardinals are going to be going after him in the offseason. He's reached out to his buddy Quintana to see, hey, what's it like over there? How's everything going? And got a thumbs up from him. I don't know how much shit I ever believed.
It's not the first time that we've heard that rumor, right? We had heard this a couple of months ago that there was talk that the Cardinals were interested. So it would make sense that, that Wilson would sniff around and see, because obviously he's going to look at his options. I think his market's going to be depressed because he's going to get the QO.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, the Cubs are not going to pass on that opportunity to pick up another draft pick, especially because assuming that they're going to sign somebody like a Carlos Rodon or somebody who's going to have draft pick compensation attached to them. Obviously, they're either going to want to bring Contreras back as a part-time catcher and probably their primary DH, or get a draft pick for him, right? They're not just going to let him walk away for nothing.
Yeah.
But I don't think it makes sense on St. Louis's side. That's just not the way that they operate. That's a team that's built around pitching and defense. And unless you're signing Wilson to be your primary DH and your second catcher, I don't see that being a move that the Cardinals make. It doesn't make sense.
I don't either. I think a lot of Cardinals fans. It's not that we don't like Contreras and his competitive fire and everything else, but they're going to want to go with one of their homegrown catchers, I believe. They've got plenty of right-handed bats in the lineup. They can plug enough guys in for a DH, even with Albert retiring. I think they've got. I'm not saying they would produce like Contreras would, but it'd be close enough to where spending that 27, 28 million is probably not going to be worth it.
Right, because the floor for him is going to be $19 million. Because that's what the qualifying offer is going to be. So that's the floor. Are you really going to pay $19 million for a 30-year-old DH and part-time catcher who's probably not going to upgrade your team's defense? I don't see it.
Well, not upgrade the defense, but how much less production are you going to get from a second, third year player who's making, $500,000, maybe a little bit more. You might get, 8-9 home runs less out of them, but are those 8-9 home runs worth that amount of money? And that's the way they're going to look at it.
Right.
So no, I don't think there may be some mutual interest, but it's zero chance.
Yeah. I think the most likely scenario is Wilson goes out on the free agent market. He finds that the market is, just as cold for him as a free agent as it was for him as a trade target. Mm-hmm. He accepts the qualifying offer. He plays one more year with the Cubs and is their primary DH. And then he walks away at the end of 2023.
Yep. That's what I would put my money on too. And at the end of next year, they can't tag him with the QO. So he's got a little bit better shot. So yep. I think that's likely. That's the way I feel. Playoffs. Cause I know we're getting up to the hour here.
Yep. Look, obviously I want to see your team go out in excruciating fashion in the first round. Not only because it's there's loads of schadenfreude in seeing your team fall, but also that in all likelihood, at least one of those losses would be at the hands of the Last Jedi. And hopefully the other loss would be at the hands of Nick. And there's another shot, and it's a 3-1 ball game. Castellanos. Yeah. So speaking of Kyle Schwarber, one of the most underwhelming 40+ home run seasons I have ever seen. Like, he barely hit over 200.
I don't know what it is. If you were a fan of any ball club, this guy's on your team and you make the playoffs, you're glad you have him. But he is just an over. You're right. It was a very quiet, good year for him that nobody talks about.
He is the second coming of Adam Dunn.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
He really is. He's going to walk, or he's going to strike out, or he's going to hit a home run, but he's not going to get on base for you.
No, that's never been his game, right? So
no.
I don't know, like these short series like this, the best of 3, it's going to take place in St. Louis starting tomorrow, where I'm still at work. God damn it. I won't be able to catch any of it. But, I think being at home in St. Louis, I have to say they probably have the advantage in this. Forget the regular season record at this point. They're the 3rd seed in this round. I do believe that they've got a great chance to get by the Phillies, but I think that's where the road ends. Your reward is to face the defending World Series champions. And even without Freddie Freeman, they're pretty damn good.
Yep. In fact, I think the Braves are my pick to come out of the National League.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Man, they'd probably be mine. If I had more time to sit here and think about this, I might agree with you. It's going to be, obviously it's going to be either. Well, here's the thing with the Dodgers, right? And this is why the Mets are scary. And I know they kind of fell on their face. The
Mets are not scary. The Mets got swept by the Cubs.
Well, I know, but
and late in the season got swept by the Cubs. But a short
series, like even a division series, to go up against a staff, if they're, I don't know, Scherzer out right now.
No, Scherzer's back. But they're only going to get Scherzer and DeGrom in a division series one time around.
Yeah, and that's why I don't think San Diego has a chance. So I think we're likely looking at the Mets and the Dodgers in their division series, and if those pitchers are hot and the Dodgers get down, that's a hard one to pick for me, right?
It's not a hard one. Well, I think the Dodgers beat the Mets because I just think the Mets they have a load of talent. They are nuclear loose, right? They got billions of dollars worth of talent and about $150 in head space. But I don't have a lot of confidence in the Dodgers. making the World Series. They're definitely not winning the World Series. I don't know if you saw it. They gave up. Not only did they score the most runs in baseball, but they gave up the most runs in baseball.
No, see, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I just saw it today.
In a short series like that, like Kershaw, we've seen it for years too. Like, I don't
Right.
trust him in the playoffs.
No. And that's something that in the regular season, especially when you're playing a lot of bad teams, that you can overcome. You can overcome giving up a lot of runs because you're going to pummel a team like the Reds.
Yeah.
You can't do that in the playoffs because the level of competition is too good. And if you're giving up 3 runs, that could very well spell the end of that game. You can't afford to give up those kind of runs. So I think the Braves are beautifully set up to be back in the World Series. And, I don't know. It depends.
Rematch?
Maybe, but have the Yankees caught fire at the right time, right? Because if you had asked me a month ago, the Yankees were not looking good, but they've gotten hot here at the end. And can they put it together, just at the right time to ride it to the end, or is it going to be the Astros? And I think it could be. I think we could see the Astros and the Braves again. I really do.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you're holding a gun to my head, I'd say, sure, I'd probably pick those two to face each other. Unfortunately, as much as I normally like to stick with the National League in my predictions, in my National League bias, that's more watered down now that we have a DH and everything else, like no difference. But I'd say that, unfortunately, I probably see Houston on top in this one. I hate it. That's not the team I want to pick. There's nothing would please me more than to have Seattle
lose again.
Seattle sneak in there and ambush them in the division series.
Oh God, wouldn't that be amazing?
It'd be amazing. Yeah, I'd love it. If that were the case, then New York's in.
Yeah.
So I think Captain Obvious here. No, I'm gonna stick with it. I'll agree with you on Atlanta. They're very athletic. They've got a good pitching staff. I'd say they got out of the gates really slow. They did what they had to the regular season and made a strong push and ran past the Mets there at the end. So I'd say Atlanta's probably in it against Houston, but damn it, if I had to put my mortgage on it, I'd probably say Houston probably takes this one.
And then we got to hear from Dusty.
And your overrated manager becomes rated.
No, he doesn't.
No, because he didn't do anything.
Because what will he have done?
Be three World Series appearances,
actually,
one championship.
Ron, are you taking that? You need to take that into your assessment of who's going to win. You need to take the Dusty Baker pitcher damage modifier. It's actually it's an algorithm that I've been working on. I can't quite get it right. But I'm going to be submitting it to Fangraphs in the offseason, the Dusty Baker pitcher damage algorithm. What do
you think he'll do? You think he'll leave a guy in too long or bring the wrong guy in?
Yeah, he leaves the guy in too long. He calls on a guy out of the bullpen too many games and too many appearances in a row. Brandon Morrow is a perfect example of even though it wasn't Dusty, still the Dusty Baker pitcher damage algorithm, right? Had they run that on Brandon Morrow, the Cubs would have known, oh shit, this is going to be a bad signing because he's ruined.
I don't think Dusty's alone. I think old Magic Mike was pretty good about burning a few guys out too.
See, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, look, it's honorary. You got to give it to Dusty because it's really, as much as it's a practical honor, right? It's also a lifetime achievement honor. It's not like he just did this with one team. He's done it with every team.
Yeah. You just see a portrait of him with the dead bodies of burnout pitchers just laying around him on the battlefield.
And then just dismembered arms, right? Like you don't even have the pictures say, hey, I think that's Pryor's right arm.
That's
hey, and there's the ghost of Kerry Wood's career. Like,
Yeah. It's a pleasant picture. All right. Who do you think who do you think's in? Who do you think takes it? Real quick.
I think yeah, when I work in the pitcher damage algorithm, I'm going to go Yankees Braves.
Okay.
And at that point, boy, I don't know because obviously I have a rooting interest with my family in Atlanta and also just being National League biased because those are the teams I grew up with.
And if I had to say there's a regional team from where I'm at right now, it's Atlanta.
Right. And yet I'd love to see Anthony Rizzo get another ring.
Yeah.
But if Anthony Rizzo gets a ring, that means Harrison Bader gets a ring.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm going to have to go with the Braves. Gonna have to go with the Braves.
Okay. All right, so we got our predictions there. You're going Braves. I'm saying, unfortunately, even I fight the puke in my mouth back. I would say the Astros.
And you know what? Sorry, Elliot. Once again, we really have monopolized tonight's conversation.
Wow. Yeah, what do you think, Elliot? He's going with the Guardians. That's an interesting pick.
Wow. That's
unpredictable.
That's one coming out of left field. Interesting. Elliot, I'm going to have to think about that. Tell you what, why don't you give Ron and I some time to process this, and we'll reconvene next week, and we'll let you know where we stand on that bold call, Cotton.
Wow. Yep.
Let's see how that works out for him.
Learn more behind the paywall.
That's right.
At Patreon.
All right. If you enjoyed tonight's content, go tell Slack to fuck themselves. And you can subscribe to us on all social media at Team of Rivals Pod. You can find us at teamofrivalspodcast.com. We are proud members of the Gateway City Sports Network, where you can catch talking baseball in the bleachers. You can catch the Derek King Sports Show. You can catch help me out here, Ron. There's one more. Recent edition.
That would be
That's a winner
podcast.
There you go.
Whoa.
If you want to reach out to Elliot and just see how he's doing, see how the new house is, ask him why he doesn't want to be on the show anymore, you can find him at TOR_Elliot. You can find Ron on Twitter at
TOR_Ron75.
We love you, folks. Maybe we'll have a script next week. Who knows? It depends on whether or not Ron decides to get raped for $25 so that he can download all of our stuff in a day.
Might have to bite the bullet. All right, Pete, thanks for walking us out. We'll be back. Maybe same time, maybe same place, maybe with or without Elliot next week. We love you so much, though. Bye-bye, everyone.